Australia once built millions of its own cars. For decades, vehicles like the Falcon, Commodore, and Magna rolled out of local factories and onto Australian roads. Entire communities depended on these plants. Thousands of workers, engineers, suppliers, and families whose livelihoods were tied to the industry. But by the 2000s, the Australian car industry was beginning to face serious challenges. Consumer preferences were shifting, competition from imported vehicles was increasing, and several locally built models were struggling to keep up with a rapidly changing market. Some of these cars experienced mechanical issues that affected certain owners. Others faced problems not because of engineering faults. And while none of these vehicles alone ended Australia's car industry, the challenges surrounding them reflected the broader difficulties the industry was facing during that decade. Today, we're looking at 4 Australian-built cars that faced significant challenges during the 2000s. Before we dive in, it's important to say this. The cars on this list were not necessarily bad vehicles. In fact, some of them won prestigious Wheels Car of the Year awards, and many examples are still on Australian roads today, with hundreds of thousands of kilometers on the clock. But beneath the surface, these cars experienced mechanical issues, market challenges, or strategic decisions that made their stories far more complicated than they first appeared. So the question is, what actually went wrong? Is your favorite Australian car on this list? Let's find out. Number 4. Ford BA Falcon 2002 to 2005, built at Broadmeadows, Victoria. When the BA Falcon arrived in 2002, it represented a major turnaround for Ford Australia. The previous Falcon had struggled with public perception, largely due to its styling. The BA was designed to correct that mistake, and in many ways, it succeeded. The car was widely praised by the media and quickly won Wheels Car of the Year in 2002. It also went on to win Australia's Best Car Award for years in a row, confirming that Ford had delivered a very capable vehicle. Under the bonnet was the BA inline-6 engine, which would later become one of the most respected Australian engines ever produced. Known for its durability and strong performance, the BA helped give the BA Falcon a reputation for reliability that still holds today. For the majority of owners, the BA Falcon proved to be a dependable and long-lasting car. However, like many vehicles that accumulate high mileage over time, certain issues became known among owners as the years passed. One of the most commonly discussed concerns involved the rear differential bushes. These rubber components are responsible for holding the differential in place while absorbing drivetrain vibration. On some higher mileage vehicles, the bushes could wear out earlier than expected. When this occurred, drivers often noticed the thump or clunk from the rear of the car during acceleration or gear changes. It wasn't a universal problem, but it became a known maintenance point on older BA Falcons. Another issue reported on some vehicles involved the automatic transmission selector cable. A small rubber bush at the transmission end of the cable could deteriorate over time, potentially preventing the vehicle from selecting gears properly. Perhaps the most widely documented concern came in May 2007, when Ford announced a service campaign affecting approximately 200,000 BA and BF Falcons produced between 2002 and 2007. On certain vehicles, rear brake hoses could experience stress when the suspension was fully extended, which over time could lead to premature wear. Ford addressed the issue by replacing the hoses under the service campaign. Despite these concerns, the BA Falcon remains widely respected across Australia today, particularly because of the BA engine. Many examples continue to cover enormous distances on Australian roads, often with hundreds of thousands of kilometers on the odometer. Number 3. Holden VE Commodore 2006 to 2009, built at Elizabeth, South Australia. When Holden introduced the VE Commodore in 2006, it was one of the most ambitious projects in the company's history. The VE was built on an entirely new platform developed in Australia, featuring a redesigned body, improved interior, and significantly better handling than previous Commodore generations. Australian buyers responded immediately. The VE quickly became one of Holden's most commercially successful vehicles of the decade, and it represented the peak of Australian-designed large car engineering. For most owners, the VE Commodore proved to be a very capable and enjoyable car to own. However, some early models equipped with the Alloytech V6 engine developed a problem that would become widely discussed among owners. Some early Alloytech engines experienced premature timing chain stretch. When this occurred, The engine control system would detect that the camshaft timing was no longer perfectly aligned with the crankshaft. The vehicle would then trigger fault codes such as P0008, P0009, P0016, and P0017. Drivers often saw warning lights appear on the dashboard, indicating that the engine required inspection. For affected owners, the repair could be expensive. Reports at the time suggested repair costs typically ranged between $2,500 and $4,000, depending on the severity of the problem. It is important to emphasize that not every VA Commodore experienced this issue. Many owners drove their vehicles for years without ever encountering it. However, for those who did experience timing chain stretch, it became a costly and frustrating repair. Holden later revised the timing chain design in May 2007, which helped address the issue in later production vehicles. Despite this controversy, the VA Commodore remains one of the most important Australian-developed vehicles ever built. Number 2. Holden Adventra to 003 to 006, built at Elizabeth, South Australia. The Holden Adventra's problems were not primarily mechanical. The engine performed well. The all-wheel drive system functioned as designed. From a technical standpoint, the vehicle largely delivered what Holden intended. The challenge was something much harder to solve: the market itself. During the early 2000s, Australian buyers were rapidly shifting toward SUVs. Families increasingly preferred vehicles with higher seating positions, flexible interiors, and designs that were purpose-built for that role. Ford recognized this shift early and introduced the Ford Territory, a vehicle developed from the ground up as a family-friendly SUV. The Territory offered practical packaging, strong safety features, and an efficient inline-six engine that appealed to everyday buyers. Holden's response was the Adventra. Instead of designing a completely new SUV, Holden adapted the existing VY Commodore station wagon platform. Engineers raised the ride height, added an all-wheel drive system called Crosstrack, and gave the car a more rugged exterior appearance. However, when buyers compared the Adventra with the Territory, the differences were clear. The Adventra was heavier and consumed more fuel, particularly in early versions that were available only with a 5.7-liter V8 engine. While powerful, this engine was not necessarily what many family buyers were looking for in a daily SUV. Inside the cabin, the Adventra also retained much of the Commodore wagon layout, which made it feel more like a modified station wagon than a purpose-built SUV. Sales figures reflected this challenge. In 2005, Ford sold more than 22,000 Territories, while Holden sold roughly 3,000 Adventras during the same period. By 2006, after only 3 years on the market, Holden decided to discontinue the model. Number 1. Mitsubishi 382,005 to 2008, built at Tonsley Park. Adelaide, the Mitsubishi 380, represents one of the most emotional chapters in Australian automotive history, because the truth is, the car itself was not widely considered a failure in terms of engineering. Automotive reviewers generally described the 380 as comfortable, refined, and well-equipped. The V6 engine delivered solid performance, and the vehicle was considered well-built. But the environment surrounding the car had changed dramatically. The Tonsley Park factory required around 30,000 sales per year to remain financially viable. In reality, the Mitsubishi 380 averaged closer to 12,000 sales annually. Several factors contributed to this gap. Mitsubishi replaced the long-running Magna nameplate with the new 380 badge. While the intention was to signal a fresh start, many Australian buyers no longer recognized the model as the successor to the Magna they had known for years. At the same time, consumer preferences were changing. During the mid-2000s, Australian buyers were rapidly shifting away from large sedans and toward SUVs and smaller vehicles. The market segment the 380 was designed for was shrinking quickly. Imported vehicles were also becoming more competitive in price and variety, placing additional pressure on locally built cars. By early 2008, Mitsubishi Motors Australia made the difficult decision to close the Tonsley Park manufacturing plant. On the 27th of March 2008, the final Mitsubishi 380, a silver platinum limited edition, rolled slowly off the production line. Factory workers stood quietly and watched it go. Many had spent decades working in that building. Some had followed their parents into the same factory years earlier. After that day, the factory never reopened. For Australian cars, for very different stories. The BA Falcon, an award-winning car that remained respected for its BA engine, but developed several known issues on some higher-mileage vehicles. The VE Commodore, one of Australia's most successful locally developed cars. Though early versions of the Aloitech V6 experienced a timing chain problem that Holden later addressed. The Holden Adventra, not a failure of engineering, but a vehicle that struggled to compete in a rapidly changing SUV market. And the Mitsubishi 3OTD, a capable car that arrived during a period when the large sedan market in Australia was already beginning to decline. These vehicles were built by Australian workers during one of the most difficult decades the country's car industry had ever faced. The challenges surrounding them reflected a broader shift in the automotive world, one that would eventually reshape Australia's manufacturing landscape forever. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.